Hey Willingdon kids! We've been looking at the good news that comes from the New Testament story. Jesus came to save us from sin. Now, through his death and through his resurrection, we are forgiven and made new, and we have a new life with him. Today, the name of Jesus that we're looking at is friend. The Bible tells us that Jesus calls us friend, which means we can be close to Jesus and enjoy his company, just like we would with the friends that we have at school or church or wherever. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about one of my friends from school when I was a kid. His name is Daniel, and we used to play on the playground together. I used to give him some of my snack. Daniel would share some of his snack with me. We would go over to each other's houses, play Lego. We would build stuff. Sometimes we'd go play at the park. We were pretty much best friends. Now, one day at school, our teacher was planning a field trip for everyone and told each kid to write down the name of the person that they wanted to be their buddy. They would go in that person's car, that they would go through the field trip with that buddy for the whole day. Now you can imagine, Daniel wrote my name on his paper, but guess what? I didn't write his name down on mine. I wrote the name of another guy in my class because, well, I knew that his dad had a fancy car and I wanted to ride in it for the field trip. Sure enough, when I got to ride in that fancy car on that field trip day, when I got to spend the day with that other classmate of mine and not Daniel, I realized that he was looking pretty sad and upset the whole time. And afterwards, Daniel didn't really want to hang out with me anymore. Turns out he was pretty upset because I wasn't being a good friend to him on that field trip day. I ditched him and left him out. Thankfully, we sorted it out and we became friends again afterwards. I was actually in his wedding, and he was in mine. Now, maybe you've been a bad friend to someone, or maybe someone's been a bad friend to you. Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, definitely knows a thing or two about that. You see, he was the disciple, you might remember, who denied Jesus 3 times. When Jesus was arrested, Peter became super angry and violent. Jesus even had to heal someone that Peter injured. Ow. And then Peter ran away and abandoned Jesus. And while Jesus was being beat up and questioned, some people recognized Peter as one of Jesus' disciples. But Peter lied and said, "I don't know him." Again, people noticed that Peter was from out of town, just like Jesus and the other disciples. And again, he lied and said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Now, you probably know the story. This happens again for a 3rd time, right before the rooster crows. Just like Jesus had said during their Passover meal before he died. Now, back to my story. When I realized how bad of a friend I was, I got pretty upset and sad. I wanted to make it right. I'm sure Peter felt awful too, especially as he saw Jesus dying on the cross. The good thing is that wasn't the end of the story. Some of the disciples, all joyful and excited after seeing Jesus alive again, they went back to their fishing boats. I mean, after all, some of them started off as fishermen. They tried to catch some fish one day, and it went into the night. And all night they fished and they couldn't catch anything. Finally, Peter saw a man on the shoreline. It was Jesus, but they didn't know it. This man called out Jesus. He said, "Friends, have you caught any fish?" You can read about it in John 21. When the disciples said no, Jesus told them to try again on the other side, to throw their nets on the other side of the boat. And when they did, suddenly their nets were filled with fish, just like the first time they met Jesus. John, one of the disciples who was there, realized and said, "It's the Lord!" Peter dove into the water to meet Jesus, with the other disciples following behind with a huge catch of fish. Jesus had made a fire. He brought some bread and invited them for breakfast together, cooking some of the fish that they had caught. As they were hanging out, like old friends, enjoying each other's company, eating some good food together, Jesus had a conversation with Peter, restoring him back. You can read about it in John 21, verses 15 to 17. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus replied, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus again replied, "Take care of my sheep." The 3rd time he said to Simon Peter, "Do you love me?" Now, Simon Peter, he was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time. Do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Hopefully you noticed that Jesus asked Peter 3 times. Just like Peter had denied knowing Jesus or being his friend 3 times, Jesus was giving Peter the chance to make it right, to express how much he loved Jesus and wanted to be close to him, and to follow in this new exciting plan to share Jesus' love with the whole world. In fact, the book of Matthew earlier, Jesus actually told Peter, you, Peter, on this rock, I will build my church. And it turns out Peter would end up telling and sharing the good news of Jesus to many, many people. And the cool thing is, the same is true for us. We are called to tell and to share the good news of Jesus. Just like Jesus forgave Peter and called him to some important work, we can be called Jesus' friends, people who are forgiven, saved, and loved by Jesus. What an amazing thing to call him friend.